This is Against the Moon, a turn-based sort of board strategy kind of idea with some roguelite-y deck building elements all sort of rolled into one. Mechanically, it's actually most similar to the Mojang game Scrolls, which is kind of a shame that probably no one remembers that, because I actually kind of liked Scrolls. I thought it was pretty neat, and that's what really attracted me to this initially. Was I thought, hey, that kind of looks like Scrolls, and just take the lane-based, like turn-based sort of board thingy, the whole strategy mechanics of that game, and then combine them with a deck builder, and you get Against the Moon. So the way it works is that you have 3 lanes, and your enemy has 3 lanes as well, each with 4 positions, and you have a deck of cards that you build throughout the adventure that contains spells to use to affect your side or the enemy's side directly, and a bunch of creatures that you can summon, as well as these beings called the Ultori, which are basically like hero units that you always have 3 of, and those are the units that are at the end of the lanes on the left side. They have their own sort of statistics and ultimate ability that you can build up energy over the turns to do that usually affects the entire board or does something large, and they can be destroyed. They have their own health value just like any other unit, and once that is depleted, they will just sort of take a little nap, and then at that point damage can then go past them, and any damage that goes past all of the units on a lane hits either you or the enemy, and does damage to you, permanent damage. That is how you actually win or lose the match, of course. If you are able to get enough damage past all of the lanes directly to the enemy commander, then you can destroy them and win, and of course the same thing happens to you. So, like I said, it is very Scrolls-esque in terms of its general idea, although without the tower, pylon, wall thingies. I don't remember what they were called. And at the beginning of every turn, you will get a certain amount of Luma. This is your mana, your energy to actually summon and use things, and you can just summon as many units as you have enough energy for on your side of the board. And I did mention ultimates. There is an energy mechanic. Every turn you gain 1 energy, and there are also some spells and units that give you energy for certain things. And once you save up enough energy, any of the currently still alive Ultori can cast their ultimate, which ranges anything from stunning a bunch of units on the enemy's field, to discarding your hand and getting some new stuff along with 1 extra energy to spend as like an emergency sort of deck mill kind of option, or just boosting the attack of a character a whole bunch and then having them fight the highest health enemy and do direct damage to them. Your arc, the actual main thing that you're defending with all these units, also has its own ultimate ability, but it takes 8 energy to use, which is way more than the normal hero abilities take. But if you save up for that, it is a very useful thing because it does a bunch of damage to all of the enemy units on the board and 5 direct damage to the enemy commandery unit that you're trying to actually destroy to win. So that's very useful, but it does take a long time to actually save up enough energy to use it, as you would expect for what's basically a board clear. One of the more unique parts takes place in between the actual matches. Every time you win a fight, you will get some resources, including these cells and some upgrade points and things for your units. And this is a pretty cool idea. Basically, you'll get a choice between 3 different things to add to your deck per one of these cells that you get for winning a match. And this is your deck builder idea for when you get to, select between the various things that you want to actually build your deck with. And the individual hero units that you have their own sort of army, so that helps to determine what kind of units that you'll actually be getting. And the really cool thing about these are the units and spells all have 2 different things that they can turn into. You'll get some upgrade points that allow you to actually just select one of whatever you have, anything, and then take it down 2 different upgrades. That's actually really neat because it means that the units aren't just the units that you see, but they also carry with them those 2 like mutually exclusive different things that they can become later. So that's actually something that I really like about this game. It's an interesting bit of strategy because sometimes you're adding things to your deck not because of what they are currently, but because of what you know they can become. So, you may add a unit to your deck that you don't have an immense need for right at this second, but you know that it can become something really useful once you get the ability to actually upgrade it. So you'll just take it along with you for a couple of matches until you can get the upgrade point that allows you to specialize it into something really, really useful for you. And that's a really neat concept. I think that's actually what this game does best. That is its most standout mechanic, the idea that every single unit and every single spell has these 2 upgraded forms that you can sort of spec them into and cause them to sometimes drastically change. The forms can be anything from just a more powerful version of what they already do to something that really changes significantly how you might actually use them. For instance, there is a shielding unit that creates a shield on the lane that you summon it to help absorb some damage before the damage actually contacts the units in the lane themselves to help make them not die as much. And the upgrades for that unit include things like making it to where it shields every lane with the same amount of shield that it normally only gave to the one that it was summoned in, so that's a big deal. Or it does the same amount of shield, but also every turn renews the shield, since the shield normally falls after every turn, kind of like armor in like a Slay the Spire style deck builder. But with that upgrade, it actually renews the shield every single turn, so that's really useful as well. So yeah, that's really where a lot of the key variety of the game comes in, is all these different units and spells and all their various upgrades. They can affect everything from the actual board on your side to the board on the enemy side to the unit directly across from where you summoned yours in the exact same like mirrored spot to the Ultori in the lane that you summon them in. They can sort of affect your hero units in various ways. So there is quite a lot of variety actually in terms of the creatures and the spells that you obtain and how you can actually combine them and synergize them together to affect the board and actually win. And of course that does also combine with the enemy variety. There are quite a few different kinds of enemies that you'll come up against, and they all have their own little synergistic elements too. Sometimes they work together in different ways to make it clear that you need to kill them as quickly as possible. Sometimes they affect the enemy commander in positive ways, so you have to sort of target them specifically with spells and stuff to get rid of them. Sometimes they actually affect your board or affect the way that you have to summon or use your hand, because maybe they gain attack every time you play a spell or something like that. So yeah, the overall variety in the game definitely comes from the interaction between your units, your spells, how you have upgraded all of those things, and how you actually plan to use them to affect the enemies, which have a lot of variety as well. But eventually you will win your battle, hopefully, and at that point you'll be taken to a board that is very much like a sort of, traditional Slay the Spire-y, multiple nodes with different difficulties and different rewards kind of board, where you choose which thing you want to actually move to next, usually determined by the rewards that they have and what you actually want for your given run. And eventually you will reach the sort of final boss of a board, and then once you beat them, you will go to the next board and then keep going. There are also nodes that aren't just combat. There are those question mark nodes that have like this sort of multiple choice choose your own adventure style thing that, again, Slay the Spire made popular in this sort of genre, where you have a short story that plays out, and then you get to choose a couple of different options at the end, which each have different outcomes depending on what you actually want to do. And one thing I've noticed about those options in this game that's different from how they work in a lot of other, Slay the Spire, Monster Train, that sort of thing, is that they tend to be very major. They don't happen all that often. They're not nearly as common as combat nodes, but when you actually do see them, they tend to have very significant effects, permanent effects on the battle. They usually aren't just like gain a couple of resources. They tend to be things like permanently alter one of your hero units in some way or something like that. So they're definitely very major choices actually, and I really appreciate them, and I kind of wish there were some more of them, because they tend to affect your run so much that it's actually really nice to run into them, and I always sort of try to make a beeline for them whenever I see that little question mark on the board, because they tend to be such run-altering things that it's always worth seeing what you're actually going to run into next. And then eventually, once you actually win or lose the run, you will be rewarded with some coins that act as the meta currency that then allow you to go back to the main menu and go to this unlock screen that you spend these coins to unlock just random new things that you can find in the next run, new spells, new creatures, stuff like that. So that's basically the gameplay loop of the game. Just play these turn-based board battles, try and get as far as you can, and then get rewarded with these coins at the end of it all that you can use to unlock more new stuff to encounter next time. It's a pretty enjoyable mixture, really, because I enjoy these turn-based battles. I like the whole lane strategy kind of concept, like Scrolls did, and some other games in the past. And I enjoy the way that the deck building mechanics actually add to it, and you have those whole 2 mutually exclusive upgrade things for every single unit and spell. It's a pretty enjoyable time, honestly, but I do have a couple of problems with it that I want to get into right now. One is that the balance of the game seems to be a little bit wonky, I think. Now, normally, longtime viewers of the channel will know that I don't like to complain about balance in games all that often, because chances are I'm just bad at it, and the balance is actually just fine, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. I just need to learn how to play it better. But in this case, I actually do feel that there is something about it that causes a sort of snowball effect kind of problem, and it's really a combination of the mechanics that together create this effect. One is that creatures are actually fairly expensive in this game, and you don't have that much energy to spend every turn. You have 6 on average, and the creatures, only a couple of them cost 2, most of them cost 3 or 4, some even cost 7 or 8 after upgrades. So you can't play that many things in a given turn. However, the enemy can play 5, 6, 7 creatures every single turn, and you don't know what the enemy is going to do, what they're going to play, until the turn is over. There is no, like, kind of like how Slay the Spire and similar games have that little preview of what the enemy is going to do. There isn't anything like that, so you have no idea what the enemy is actually going to do, and the developers themselves have actually said that's because the game itself doesn't know what the enemies are going to do until you hit the end turn button, which is simultaneously really neat to have this sort of adaptive AI that actually affects itself based on how you're playing, but at the same time it means that all of these mechanics combine together to make a feeling of being only reactionary, to make it feel like you're reacting to what the enemy is doing and never actually being proactive, never actually assembling a strategy of your own, because oftentimes it takes everything you have every single turn just to respond to what the enemy just did. And you realize like 8 turns in that you've barely been able to damage the enemy at all, because every single turn you've been just consumed with trying not to take a bunch of damage yourself, let alone actually try and attack back. So the matches in this game seem to be decided quite early on by this sort of snowball effect sometimes, where either you or the enemy will have a very good board, and it will stay a very good board and keep getting better and better every turn until eventually War of Attrition makes it so by like the 6th or 7th or 8th turn, the other guy, whether it's you or the enemy, just can't keep up anymore and they lose. And that may have been decided like 6 turns ago, but it has slowly snowballed to actually, to the conclusion over the course of those number of turns. So the fact that the enemy can constantly send large hordes at you, and you don't know what they're actually going to do until they do it, and that you can only play a very small number of things to respond every turn, all of those things mesh together to mean that sometimes in some matches it just feels not necessarily unfair, but kind of unbalanced in the enemy's favor because of how much stuff they can do with no warning and how little you can do to respond to it. And my other real problem with the game is that it seems unfinished. Looking through what is on the store page and what we have in the game, it kind of feels like it is not actually done cooking yet, but the game is not currently labeled as being in early access, even though it almost kind of feels like it should be. And that's sort of strange. Some of the features on the list mention things that aren't in the game. They mention things like more Ultori than are currently in the game. There are only 4, I believe, currently, and apparently there are supposed to be more than that. It also mentions stuff like weapons, being able to equip the Ultori, which is not something that you can do right now. And it even shows some screenshots. The first 3 screenshots are menus that don't seem to actually exist in the game. It shows like a sort of menu that has a selection of Ultori, and then it shows what sort of army that they command. It seems like a kind of deck building starter thing that allows you to see what sort of stuff each one comes with, and also allows you to select different variants of that Ultori, and none of those screens are actually in the game as far as I can tell. There's even one later on as a GIF in the Steam description that shows this sort of map thing with a research bar and stuff like that, with like a bunch of what look like enemy bosses and stuff on it, and as far as I can tell, that screen is not in the game either. I don't know where all of these are, but as far as I can tell, you can't actually go to any of those menus. They don't exist right now. Now, of course, I could be very wrong, and I could just be missing something obvious. That's entirely possible. I don't want to say objectively that these things are not in the game for sure, but from what I can tell, they're not. And I mean, there are only 3 options of campaign, so it's not like I'm missing something obvious, I don't think. It seems like there are only a certain number of screens that you could possibly access, and after accessing all of them, some of the stuff that is advertised doesn't actually seem to be in the game right now. So that's really my main problem with the game, is that it seems to be unfinished, but it is not marked as such, and that's kind of an issue. I think that it's a really nice base, but it needs some work, it needs some balancing efforts, it needs some more content in terms of the Ultori and the various things that you can select, and it needs those interesting looking character and army select screens that are in the Steam description to actually be in the game, because that would help a lot in terms of actually creating a more interesting run by having all these other options that seem to be presented but aren't actually things that you can do right now, as far as I can tell. It's an intriguing concept, and so far I really have enjoyed my time with Against the Moon, because it takes me back to playing Scrolls and renews it with the sort of deck building mechanics that I tend to really enjoy. But I would suggest right now keeping an eye on the Steam page on the updates, and then see what they add before you actually try and jump into it yourself, because right now it just has this distinct feeling that it's not done cooking yet, and I'm just curious as to what the developers are going to do next, what they're going to add, if they're going to add stuff. And I think that honestly people should look at the updates and actually keep an eye on what they alter, what they put in, before they pull the trigger and buy it themselves, because I do feel like there is some stuff missing, some balance passes that need to be done, just some general finishing and polishing up that needs to be done first. So overall, yeah, Against the Moon, pretty solid, needs a little bit of work. Hopefully it sees some updates soon that sort of makes all of this more clear as to what's actually going on and all that. So yeah, I'll link you in the description below this video to the Steam page so you can keep an eye on it yourself. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.